The petrified formations of the Sahara reveal a lost past. Somewhere beneath the reddish dunes of the Sahara, there are stone structures that defy what we know about the history of the Earth. They are not pyramids, they are not human constructions, they are geological formations so strange that it took centuries for anyone to really begin understanding what they represent. And when you learn the truth about how they formed, you will see the desert we know today in a completely different way. This is the story of a lost world, not the mythical world of forgotten civilizations, but the real world of an Earth that was radically different from everything we see now. Approximately 6,000 years ago, the Sahara was not a desert. It had abundant rain, it had rivers, it had enormous lakes, and it had life, lots of life. Animals that we now associate with African savannas roamed there. Giraffes, antelopes, elephants, even rhinoceroses. There is rock art evidence scattered throughout the region showing ancient hunters pursuing these animals in completely green landscapes. It is not legend, it is not speculation. They are engravings left by peoples who lived there, recording the world they had before them. But something changed, and it changed dramatically. When you walk through the valleys and rock formations of the Sahara today, especially in regions like the Tassili Najjar in Algeria or the Akakis Plateau in Libya, you find something disturbing. Rock structures that look like petrified tree trunks, formations that at first glance remind you of giant fossilized trees. Some are dozens of meters tall. Others appear in rows, as if they had grown together once. The local inhabitants have names for them. Ancient explorers documented these formations in journals and maps, and for centuries, no one really understood what they were looking at. The question that haunted geologists and archaeologists was simple: how did these structures form? And if the Sahara was green just a few thousand years ago, where are the remains of all that forest? The answer lies in a combination of geological processes that completely transformed an entire continent, and it is a story much more complex than it appears on the surface. Let us start with what really happened to the Sahara. Between 12,000 and 5,000 years ago, there was a climatically humid period in North Africa called the African Holocene Optimum. The monsoon patterns changed. The intertropical convergence zone, the band of rain systems that normally stays closer to the equator, shifted northward. This meant that what is today the Sahara received regular rain, lots of rain. There were lakes, there were perennial rivers, there was abundant vegetation. The pollen records, which study the types of pollen preserved in ancient sediments, show a radically different landscape. Pollen from trees, from shrubs, from grasses, from plants that need water to grow. Anthropologists and archaeologists have found ancient camps in these regions. There are ceramic findings dated to 8,000 years ago. There are remains of campfires. There is rock art showing hunts, dances, rituals. The peoples who lived there left a visual record of a world that today seems completely imaginary. Because between 5,000 and 4,500 years ago, it all ended. The climate reversed. The monsoon patterns moved back south. Rain decreased, rivers dried up, lakes evaporated. And the desert, that desert we know today, began to expand. It was a process that took centuries, perhaps even a millennium or more. But it was enough transformation to make an entire region shift from productive savanna to arid desert. Now, here's the part that begins to seem strange. When you have an entire forest dying, what happens to all the trees? In most cases, they rot, they decompose, they become organic matter, they become soil. But under very specific conditions, very dry and very hot, what you are seeing in parts of the Sahara is something different. The petrified formations we find today can be explained by several processes. Some are genuinely tree trunks that have been petrified over millions of years by natural mineralization processes. There is a famous deposit near Wadi Rum where tree trunks were slowly replaced by silica, transforming wood into stone. The process is slow, but real. When mineral-rich water permeates buried wood, the minerals can gradually replace the cellulose structure, cell by cell. What you are left with is an exact copy in stone. There are fossils like this in various places around the world, and yes, some may be in the Sahara. But not all the strange structures you see are trunks. Some of them are pure geological formations. They are natural pillars created by differential erosion. The Sahara has very ancient rock layers. Some of them are more resistant to erosion than others. Over millions of years, wind-carrying sand and particles acts as an abrasive. It erodes the rock unevenly. If one layer is harder than another, you are left with structures that look like columns or trunks, but they are just rock. The resemblance to trees is almost accidental. It is geological pareidolia, our tendency to see familiar forms in natural structures. There is still a third type of formation. Some of the petrified trunks you see are petroglyphs or rock formations that have been worn in ways that make them look like ancient structures, especially when viewed from a distance, especially at certain times of day when the angle of light creates specific shadows. But here is what makes this truly fascinating. Even if not all of these trunks are real petrified trees, the fact is that the Sahara had forests. This is not speculation. It is documented. It is recorded in rock art. It is recorded in pollen. It is recorded in sedimentary deposits. It is recorded in the bones of animals that lived there. The world that ancient Saharans drew was there. And then it disappeared. More recent expeditions to the Sahara's rock formations found something even more intriguing. There are areas where you can see different layers of sediment, each representing different climatic periods. There is sand, there is limestone, there is mud, there is evidence of water at different levels. It is like reading pages of a geological book. Each layer is a chapter. And when you read from bottom to top, you see the transformation. You see evidence of abundance. You see evidence of change. You see evidence of aridity. Archaeologists working in the Sahara have found artifacts in positions that should be impossible if the desert had always been so dry. There are ancient wells, some of them with a depth of up to 30 meters, dug to access groundwater. Why would you dig a well so deep in a desert? Because there was hope of finding water. Because there was a record of water. Because the knowledge of past generations said that water could be found if you knew where to dig. That was valuable information. It was inherited knowledge. And then there is Wadi Aramat in Libya, where deposits of marine fossils were found at altitude. The Sahara is not a coast. It never was a modern coast. But millions of years ago, there was an ocean there, ancient seas, and the deposits left by these seas are now exposed in the dunes. It is clear evidence of geological transformation on a continental scale. One thing that is often exaggerated in narratives about the ancient Sahara is the idea that there were advanced cities or lost civilizations. Archaeology does not support this. What there were Neolithic and pastoralist peoples. There was no writing yet, not there. There were no large-scale constructions. There were communities of hunter-gatherers and later herders. There was impressive art. There was social organization. But there were not the types of monumental structures that some sensationalist narratives suggest. What there was, however, was knowledge. There was the transmission of wisdom about how to live in a changing environment. There was adaptation. When the Sahara began to dry out, these populations migrated. Some went west to what is now Mauritania and Senegal. Some went south toward what would be the Sahel. Some went to the Nile Valley, bringing their techniques, their stories, possibly their deities. And that migration had consequences that can be seen in human history. There is research suggesting that climate migrations from the Sahara contributed to the development of Nile civilization. Peoples displaced by the advancing desert brought knowledge, agricultural techniques, and perhaps even contributed genetically to the populations that would build Egyptian civilization. This is not speculation. These are conclusions based on genetic analysis, archaeological records, and ancient DNA studies. The petrified formations we see in the Sahara today, whether they are genuinely fossilized trees or simply strange rock structures created by erosion, are markers. They are signs. They point to a past. They are physical evidence that the world we know is not the world that always was. When you walk among these structures, especially if you see them carefully and attentively, you are walking through an open-air museum of climate transformation. It is a lesson in how quickly a planet can change. The Sahara had its Holocene optimum, it had its green period, and it lost it, not in millions of years, but in centuries. A time frame that is, for geological purposes, practically instantaneous. Archaeologists working in the Tassili Najer, that plateau in Algeria with its extraordinary rock art, speak about the surreal feeling of being in a place where the rock walls contain images of animals that no longer live there. Giraffes in a desert, elephants in a place where there is no water, hunters with spears in what is now a void. You are looking at a world that ended, at a time that came to an end. And the minerals in the rocks, the fossils in the sediments, the strange structures you see are the only records that remained. There are recent expeditions using scanning and 3D modeling technology to document these formations with precision. Researchers are creating digital maps of the entire region, cataloging rock formations, locating fossils, mapping sedimentary layers. What is emerging is an increasingly clear understanding of not only what the Sahara was, but why it changed. One of the most significant discoveries comes from the study of Earth's orbital variations. The Earth is not in a stable and immobile orbit. It oscillates. Its orbit changes from slightly elliptical to more circular. Its axis tilts and tilts back. These cycles, called Milankovitch cycles, affect how much solar radiation the Earth receives at different latitudes at different times. When you map these orbital cycles and compare them with past climate data, you discover that there was a period a few thousand years ago where the Earth's orbit and the orientation of the axis created specific conditions that sent more moisture to the Sahara region. And then, when the cycles changed again, that moisture went away. This is not coincidence. It is mechanics. It is physics. The Earth's climate system responds to orbital cycles. And this means that large-scale climate changes can happen with predictable regularity. The Sahara did not have a Holocene optimum by chance. It had one because the Earth's orbit at that time favored moisture in that region. And when the orbit changed, the moisture left. What this implies for the future is something that climate scientists take very seriously. If the Earth goes through these cycles, if large regions of the planet can become dry or fertile based on orbital mechanics, this has implications for how we think about the climate we're experiencing now. Contemporary climate changes are not orbital cycles. They are driven by different factors, but they occur against the backdrop of a planet that has already had massive climate oscillations, and that may have them again. The lesson of the Green Sahara is twofold. First, the Earth changes. It changed dramatically in the past. It can change again. Second, we as humans have to live through these cycles. The peoples of the ancient Sahara could not stop the advancing desert. They did not have the technology for it. They had to adapt. They had to migrate. They had to change how they lived. And despite that, they succeeded. They did not disappear. They just went somewhere else. The petrified formations that remain are memorials. They are reminders. They are artifacts of a world that modern human eyes rarely see, but that left signs in every layer of sediment, in every rock structure, in every preserved fossil. And if you look more closely at these signs, if you really study the Sahara as a book, you will discover that it has stories to tell. Stories about transformation. Stories about wind and water and rock. Stories about how the planet changes. Stories about how people adapt and survive. These stories are not less fascinating because they do not have aliens or lost civilizations. They are fascinating because they are real. Because they are all around us. Because if we pay attention, They can teach us something vital about the world we inhabit.